Welcome back to On the Same Page. We are on Daf Yud Amud Beis of Maseches Kiddushin, 10b, and we are 7 lines from the top of the page. The Gemara is discussing the method of Kiddushin of Bia, of intercourse, and we're in the middle of discussing a particular question, which is Bia like other forms of Kiddushin, that after one does Kiddushin in this method, in this manner, we have just Erusin, just betrothal? Or does Kiddushin actually skip straight to the second level of marriage of Nisuin, full-fledged, consummated marriage? And the Gemara mentioned different nafkaminas, differences between the status of Erusin and the status of Nisuin. That at Erusin, at betrothal, for example, the husband doesn't inherit his wife if she dies, his fiancé, his arusa. But once you have Nisuin, then he would inherit her if she dies. Another difference is if he's a Kohen, if she could eat Truma. If she is an Arusa, then she does not eat Truma. And if she's a Nesua, then she does. And actually that particular nafkamina, that particular difference is the subject of our Gemara now in approaching in this question of, is she an Harusa or is she a Nesua? Is she fully married after Bia as a Nesua, or is she still just betrothed? So the Gemara says 7 lines down, Tashma, come and listen. We're going to prove from this Brisa in one direction. The Brisa says, Ukvar shalach Yochanan ben Bagbag etzel Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira l'netzivim. Yochanan ben Bagbag sent a message to Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira in the city of Netzivim, and he said, Shamati alecha, I heard about you, Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira, she'ata omer, that you say, Arusa bas Yisrael ocheles betruma. I heard that you claim that an Arusa, a betrothed woman, not yet fully married, not yet a Nesua, who is a bas Yisrael, she's from a Yisrael family, and she marries a Kohen, that you say that already at the time of Erusin, she's allowed to eat Truma. Truma, again, is food that's normally reserved for Kohanim, for a Kohen and his family, and his avadim, his slaves, and like we said, normally it would seem that at the point of Erusin, a fiancé, a betrothed woman, would not be able to eat Truma. He said, I heard that you said that she could already at the time of Erusin. Shalachlo, so Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira sent back to Yochanan ben Bagbag, and he said to him, Ve'ata i'ata omer king, you don't say that? You don't agree that an Arusa should be able to eat Truma? Muchzakani b'chashata baki b'chadrei Torah, lidrosh Muchzakani b'chashata baki b'chadrei Torah. I was certain about you that you were an expert in the Chadrei is like from the word rooms, the depths, the deep rooms of Torah. I thought that you can get in that you knew you were an expert in the depths of Torah. Lidrosh b'kavachomer yata yodea. You don't know how to make a kavachomer. You don't know how to make an argument a for tiari. I thought you were an expert. What's my kavachomer that teaches me that an arusa should be allowed to eat truma? Umash shivcha kenanis she'en biyasa machilasa betruma. Kaspa machilasa betruma. If you look at a Canaanite maidservant that is acquired by a Jew, so as a slave. So if he tried to marry her with Bia, it wouldn't work. So Bia, he can't marry her. He's usher. It's forbidden to marry an Eved. So he says, if the Kohen would try to have Bia with her, with the intent of marrying her, to be Kona her, she wouldn't, first of all, the Kiddushin wouldn't work, and he wouldn't be married to her, and therefore she certainly would not be able to eat Truma as a result of that. Again, this is before he acquires her. If he would just try to marry her through Bia, that wouldn't do anything, and she would not be able to eat Truma. So if when it comes to a Shifcha Kananis, a Canaanite slave, we say that Bia does not work to allow her to eat Truma from the Kohen, but Kaspa Machilasa B'Truma. But Kesef does. If he would acquire her with money, then she would now be part of the family. She'd be able to eat Truma. So Zu Shebiasa ma'achilasa b'truma. So a wife who is betrothed or married through bia, and he says that bia does allow her to eat truma. Eino din shekaspa ma'achilasa b'truma. Wouldn't you say all the more so that kesef, that money, should allow her to eat truma by a kal v'chomer? So, and then he concludes, but what can I do? Shari amru chachamim, but the chachamim said, ein arusa bas Yisrael chalas b'truma, ad shetikanes l'chuppah. The chachamim said that an arusa bas Yisrael, a betrothed girl from a Yisrael family, can't eat truma until she enters chuppah, until she actually goes over to into full marriage. So, and that is going to be for a side reason, which we'll get to. But let's just re-explain his kal v'chomer. So his kal v'chomer is he's trying to prove that an arusa bas Yisrael, at least from the Torah standpoint, should be allowed to eat truma if her husband or her fiance is a Kohen. And his kal v'chomer is like this: if a shifcha Canaanis, if a Canaanite slave, if the Kohen were to have bia with her, would have intercourse with her to try to marry her, then it wouldn't do anything, and she still wouldn't be able to eat truma. He can't acquire her that way as a slave. He can't acquire her that way as a wife. She is not eligible for that. So if he would do that, she would not be able to eat truma through bia, and yet through kesef, through money, through acquiring her, she can eat truma. So he said, a wife who through bia can eat truma, so all the more so through kesef, she should be able to eat truma. And even at the point of erisin, at the point of betrothal, she should be able to already eat truma. But he says, but what can I do? Because the chachamim came along and said, despite all that, she still can't eat truma, which will be for a side reason, which we'll get to. But what we have to discuss, what the Gemara is going to go into now, is what does he mean when he says that a wife, through bia, she could eat truma? What point is this bia, is this intercourse happening? Is this Kiddushin? Is it the consummation of the marriage after Kiddushin? And that's going to be an important question in trying to prove whether bia is Kiddushin or it's already Nisuin. It's already full-fledged marriage. So the Gemara says, Hey Chidami. What's the case here? What did he mean? Because we're going to try to prove from this brisa with regards to whether bia is just erising or it's also nisuin. So we have to understand what he meant. Ibe bia sh'al yedei chuppah, v'kasef sh'al yedei chuppah. If he's comparing apples to apples, he's comparing bia after a kiddushin. There was a kiddushin if he's comparing a bia that's followed by chuppah, which is followed by a full marriage, to kesef, shal yidei chuppah, to a kesef, to betrothing with money that's followed by a full-fledged marriage, so then b'tarvayo mechal achla, then she could eat truma in both cases. We don't need the kal v'chomer for that, meaning she's not an arusa anymore. Which, if the bia that he's talking about is bia followed by chuppah, followed by a full-fledged marriage, and he's saying if over there you can eat truma, then she should also be able to eat truma, or when she eats truma there, so also she should be able to eat truma if she did kiddushin with kesef, followed by chuppah. Well, that we don't need any kal v'chomer for. That's just the general halacha, that if she had kiddushin, let's say with kesef, with money, followed by chuppah, followed by full-fledged marriage, then she could eat truma. She's fully married to the Kohen. We don't need the kal v'chomer for that situation. Ve'ela bibia sh'al yedei chuppah, v'kesef sh'al yedei chuppah. So maybe he's comparing bia followed by chuppah, meaning the bia was the kiddushin, and then there was chuppah to consummate the marriage, and he wants to prove from there that if she could do that, then she should also be able to, and then eat truma, then she should also be able to eat truma with just kiddushin, just as an arusa. So if it's bia sh'al yedei chuppah, if it's bia followed by chuppah, which is bia for kiddushin followed by chuppah to consummate the marriage, And he's comparing that to kesef shelo yidei chuppah, to where you just have kiddushay kesef, but you don't actually have chuppah following it. And he wants to try to prove somehow that with just the kiddushin of kesef, she should be able to eat truma. Hacha tarti v'hacha chada. Well, you can't compare those. One, there's two steps. You have both kiddushin followed by chuppah, and that, yeah, you could eat truma. But to try to learn somehow from there that with just one step, with just kiddushin of kesef, just as an arusa, she should be able to eat truma. Why should we be able to learn that? You can't compare those two. Elolav bebia shelo yidei chuppah, v'kesef shelo yidei chuppah. So it must be that we're talking about that he's comparing bia that's not followed by chuppah to kesef, to money that's not followed by chuppah, where both were done just as the kiddushin. And he's saying that in the situation where it's a kal v'chomer from shifcha Canaanite, from the Canaanite slave, but ultimately he's saying that a Jewish wife, a regular wife, that if she could eat truma after chuppah, if she could eat truma after bia, and we're saying that the bia is just the point of kiddushin, it's not followed by chuppah, then she should also be able to eat truma with just kesef, with just kiddushin of kesef. She should, as just an arusa, she should be able to eat truma. So what do we mean that with just bia already then she could eat truma? If you'll tell me that bia actually causes nisuin, it causes a full-fledged marriage. If you do kiddushin with bia, it works all the way through to bring about a full nisuin. So then mishum hachi pshitole, then we understand why it was obvious to him, obvious to Rabbi Yehuda, da'alima le bia mikesef, why he felt that bia was obvious, that she should be able to eat truma, because it is better than kesef. It works better than kesef because it works a full nisuin. And we would be saying that we see that a wife can be mikudeshes, she can be betrothed with bia, and not only that, but that's full-fledged nisuin that allows her to eat truma, because she's actually fully married. So if a shifcha Canaanite cannot eat truma after bia, but she could eat truma after kesef, well, a regular wife that could eat truma, or a wife that could eat truma after bia, because bia is both kiddushin and nisuin, so all the more so she should be able to eat truma after kesef, after just money, because a shifcha Canaanite a Canaanite slave could just from kesef, so all the more so a wife should be able to just from kesef, just from money. Then that would make sense if indeed bia is full-fledged nisuin. That's why it was obvious that bia allows her to eat truma. But if you tell me that bia is only kiddushin and not nisuin, why would it have been obvious to him that after bia she could eat truma, and yet it wasn't obvious to him that after kiddushin of kesef she can't eat truma. In other words, the whole premise of the Kal V'chomer from Shifcha Canaanite is based on the idea that it was obvious to him that by bia she should now be able to eat truma. Now, if bia actually creates nisuin, then I understand why it was obvious to him that she should be able to eat truma. But if bia is just kiddushin, then it's the same as kesef. And if he's not sure, if he needs to be able to prove with regards to kesef, with regards to kiddushin with money, that now she, as an arusa, she could eat truma, if that's not obvious to him, except for from the Kal V'chomer, well, why would it be obvious to him that bia works to allow her to eat truma? So it must be that bia is nisuin oseh. It must be the reason why it was obvious to him that bia allows her to eat truma is because bia actually brings about a full-fledged nisuin. So Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak said no. Le'olam ei malach bebia sh'ayidei chuppah v'kesef sh'ayidei chuppah. He says not necessarily. You don't have a proof from this brisa really you can say that the brisa is working with a case of bia followed by chuppah, and it's trying to prove from there to a case of kesef, of Kiddushin with kesef that's not followed by chuppah. Now you'll tell me, well, how can you compare those two? One is a two-step process. One has both steps, so it makes sense that she should be able to eat truma, and the other one has only one step. It's only Kiddushin, so why should she be able to eat truma? And that which you asked, this one has two steps, so it makes sense she should eat truma, and this one only has one. So, Kavachomer miya iseh. He says, still, it doesn't hurt the Kavachomer. The logic of the Kavachomer is still operating. And this is what he sent him. This was the message. Remember, this was what Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira sent to Ben Bagbag, to Yochanan ben Bagbag. He said, you don't know how to make a Kavachomer? Here's my Kavachomer. And now we'll explain the Kavachomer based on this new information that really we're talking about Bia followed by Chuppah, and therefore we can't prove anything about Bia being able to create Nisuin on its own. No, Bia is followed. We're talking about Bia followed by Chuppah, and we make the Kavachomer as follows. Uma shifcha kenanis she'en biasa machilasa betruma. If a shifcha kenanis, a Canaanite maidservant, Bia doesn't help to allow her to eat truma, doesn't acquire her, and he can't make her his wife, and that's afila yidei chuppah. And that will be true even if you follow the Bia with chuppah, it still won't help. He can't marry her, and she will not be allowed to eat truma if he does Bia with a Canaanite slave. Again, she's not yet a slave. He's trying to acquire her, and as a wife or as a maidservant, as a slave, and it doesn't work even when it's followed by chuppah. That doesn't make a difference. And yet, kaspa machilasa below chuppah, but kesef works to allow her to eat truma even when the kesef, the money, is not followed by chuppah. So a Canaanite slave, Bia followed by chuppah, doesn't do anything. Kesef not followed by chuppah does do something. So zu shebiyasa machilasa betruma al yedei chuppah. So a regular woman that he's trying to marry, if he does Bia followed by chuppah, it does work to allow her to eat truma, because there you have a full marriage. You have a Bia, which was Kiddushin, followed by chuppah, which is Nisu, and now she's fully married, and that we know she could eat truma. Eino din shekaspa machilasa betruma below chuppah. Can't we make a kavachomer and say, so all the more so for her kesef, money, even though it's not followed by chuppah, should allow her to eat truma. If a Canaanite slave, Bia followed by chuppah, does not allow her to eat truma, and yet kesef followed by chuppah, not followed by chuppah, does allow her to eat truma, because she just has to be acquired with kesef, and then she could eat truma. So a wife that Bia followed by chuppah does allow her to eat truma, all the more so that kesef, even not followed by chuppah, should allow her to eat truma. That's the kavachomer from Shifcha Kananis. And he says, he concludes though, aval ma'aseh, but what can I do? Shari amru chachamim, because the chachamim said, ein arusa bas Yisrael chelas betruma ad shetikanis l'chuppah. The chachamim said that despite the fact that it seems midoraisa, she should be able to eat truma, but the chachamim says she shouldn't. We are not going to allow her to eat truma. Why not? Mishum de'ula. Because of what Ula said. What did Ula say? So Ula said, earlier, back on Daf Hey, we had it, 5a, Ula said that the reason why an Arusa, a betrothed woman, can't eat Truma is because we're afraid that she's going to share it with her family. As a betrothed woman, she's normally still back at her parents' house. She's living with her siblings. She's a Bas Yisrael. She happens to be betrothed to a Kohen. So that allows her to eat Truma, midaraisa. But the Rabbanan said that she shouldn't, because she's going to start snacking on some truma at home, and her brother or sister is going to ask her for some, and she's going to share some with them, and they are not allowed to eat the truma. So therefore, the Chacham said she shouldn't eat truma at all. Ravina has a different approach to this story of this brisa, which talks about this back and forth between Yochanan ben Bagbag and Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira. Ravina says, Midaraisa mifshat pshita leida'acha. Then, really, Midaraisa, it was obvious to everyone that, even to Ben Bagbag, even to Rabbi Yehuda, certainly to Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira, but even to Ben Bagbag, it was obvious that Midaraisa an Arusa is allowed to eat Truma. U'midrabanan hu dishalachle. And when Ben Bagbag sent a message to Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira, he was really addressing the issue on a rabbinic level. V'hachi shalachle. And this is what he sent him. Shamati alecha shata omer arusa bas Yisrael chelas betruma. I heard, Rabbi Yehuda, that you said that an arusa, a betrothed woman who's a Yisrael, betrothed to a Kohen, could eat truma. V'lo chayashta l'simpun. And I heard that you're not concerned about simpun. What is simpun? Simpun is basically a rejection, or in this case a mekach tos, that it will be seen as an error in and the ability to renege on the transaction. So in this case, we're concerned, he says, that if they're not yet married and they're just betrothed, well, when the husband does actually marry her, or takes the step to marry her, well, I guess really even before that. At some point before he takes the step to marry her, we are concerned that he may realize that this girl has some kind of blemish, and he will want to retract the Kiddushin. So the challenge here is that Yochanan ben Bagbag says, he says, how can you, Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira, say that an arusa, betrothed woman, could eat truma? Aren't you concerned about simpun? Aren't you concerned that the man may decide that she's blemished and may decide not to go forward with the marriage? And it will be considered, he'll find something that is, I guess, enough to be considered a mekach tos, an error in acquisition, and the whole thing will be rescinded. And that will mean that if she ate truma in the meantime, then it turned out retroactively that it was forbidding for her to eat that truma. So how could you not be concerned about simpun? About this concern, how can you allow her to eat truma? Maybe it will turn out that retroactively she was never betrothed to him, and she wasn't allowed to eat the truma. So shalach lei, so Rabbi Yehuda sent back, ve'ata yata omer king, he says, you don't agree that an arusa could eat truma? Why are you so worried about simpun? Why are you so worried that he may want to take it back, he may find a blemish? Musakani b'cha, shata baki b'chadrei Torah. I thought, I was certain of you that you were an expert in the secrets of Torah. And lidersh b'kal v'chomer iyata yodea. You don't know how to make a kal v'chomer. You don't know how to make logic a fortiori. Uma shivcha kenanis she'em biyasa ma'achilasa b'truma. Kaspa ma'achilasa b'truma. He says, let's take a look at the shivcha kenanis, and he's learning again a different version of the kal v'chomer than what we said before. He says, if a shivcha kenanis, a Canaanite maidservant, bia, does not allow her to eat truma, but kaspa machilasa b'truma, and yet kesef, money, does allow her to eat truma. If he acquires her with kesef, she could eat truma. V'lo nechosh l'simpun, v'lo chayshinan l'simpun, and we're not concerned about simpun. We're not concerned when it comes to the Canaanite slave that he's going to acquire her, and then he's going to find some sort of blemish with her, and he's going to negate the sale. And in the meantime, she ate truma, and that would be a problem. But he says, you're not concerned about that. You agree that when a person acquires a Canaanite slave, if a Kohen acquires a Canaanite slave, then she would be allowed to eat truma. And we're not afraid that, he may find something wrong with her and negate the whole sale, which will mean retroactively she ate truma be'isr, that was forbidden to her to eat truma. He says, you're not concerned about that by the shivcha kenanis. So, a wife, shebiyasa machilasa b'truma, that bia does allow her to eat truma. Rashi says, because by the time he enters marriage, he is certain that he won't enter into a marriage without first confirming that he has no reservations. And certainly at the point of marriage, we're not going to be concerned of simping anymore. Once they enter into marriage, maybe before that at betrothal we're concerned, but once they enter into marriage, we're not concerned that he's going to have any reservations, and we're certainly not concerned about simpun at that point, that he's going to negate the acquisition. Tosfos adds actually that even we have to really, to fit this in, we really have to say that forget about marriage, even even we're trying to argue now within the possibility that Bia is not full-fledged marriage. Let's say Bia is just Kiddushin. But even then, the Gemara is making the argument that a person, he's basically, Rabbi Yehuda is saying, you'll agree to me that no man will have relations, will have intercourse, unless he's sure that he is going to want to keep her as a wife. And therefore, at that point, there's no chashash, there's no concern about simpun, and she would be allowed to eat truma. That you would agree, because at that point, we're no longer concerned that he will negate the sale, or negate the marriage in this case. So eino din shekaspa machilasa b'truma v'lo neichel shel simpun. Shouldn't we say all the more so that if he acquires her with kesef, with just money, that she should be able to eat truma, and we shouldn't be worried about simpun? Again, the logic of the Kal V'chomer is if by a shifcha kananis, by a Canaanite slave, Bia does not allow her to eat truma, and yet kesef does allow her to eat truma, money, and right, if he acquires a Canaanite slave with money, she's now allowed to eat truma, and we're not afraid that he's going to go back on that acquisition, that he's going to find something wrong and negate it. So a regular wife that Bia does allow her to eat truma, because at that point we're definitely not concerned that he's going to find something wrong with her. If he had Bia, that means he accepted her already. So if Bia allows her to eat truma, so all the more it allows her to eat truma, and it doesn't allow Shifcha Kananis to eat truma. So all the more so, if that kesef, that money, should allow the wife to eat truma, if it allows the Shifcha Kananis to now eat truma, we're not afraid that he's going to negate that acquisition. So it should allow the wife to eat truma. We shouldn't be concerned that he's going to negate her acquisition as a wife. That is Rabbi Yehuda's Kal V'chomer. But he says, "Aval ma'aseh, but what can I do? Shari amru chachamim arusa bas Yisrael eino cheles b'truma." He says, but at the end of the day, not because of the concern of simpun that he's going to negate the sale, but because of a different reason, the chachamim said that she cannot eat truma. An arusa, a betrothed woman, cannot eat truma until she's fully married. Mishum de'ula, and that was the reason that we mentioned earlier, Ula's reason, which is that we're afraid that she might share it with her siblings. That's the reason. Not because of simpun. It's not because we're afraid that the Rabbanan were afraid that he might negate the sale and retroactively, or negate the marriage and retroactively it won't be a good marriage. And that will be a problem that she ate truma. That wasn't the reason, says Rabbi Yehuda. I have a Kal V'chomer to prove that wasn't the reason. Because we don't apply that by a Shifcha Kananis, by a Canaanite slave. But there's a different reason the Chachamim said that she can't eat truma, which is because of Ula's concern that she's going to share it with her family. As says the Gemara, what does Ben Bagbag respond? Ben Bagbag sent to Rabbi Yehuda, that Arusa shouldn't be able to eat truma. And Rabbi Yehuda said, yeah, and the reason, according to this version, was because of simpun, because we're afraid that he might find a blemish and negate it. And Rabbi Yehuda said, don't you know how to make a Kal V'chomer? So what does Ben Bagbag respond? Ben Bagbag, he'll say back that that's not a good Kal V'chomer. You know why? Because simpun ba'avadim lesla. He doesn't hold of any concern of simpun when it comes to the Canaanite slave. The whole Kal V'chomer was based on the premise that we're not concerned of simpun, that they'll find something wrong by the Canaanite slave. So we should say the same thing, or Kal V'chomer, in the case of the wife, we shouldn't be concerned that he's going to find anything wrong. Says the Gemara, Ben Bagbag holds, you can't make that Kal V'chomer because there is nothing that he might discover about the Canaanite slave that will cause him to negate the sale. Why not? He says, if we're talking about some kind of outward blemish in the Canaanite slave, in the Canaanite maidservant, well, he saw that, and he still acquired her, so he's not going to be able to use that as a reason to negate the sale. He accepted that. And imishum woman sheba seiser, and if we're talking about some kind of hidden blemish on the Canaanite slave that he can't see, mein hafgale minei. Why does he care if she has got some kind of blemish? Limlacha kabayile. Lo ichbatle. He wants her for work. She's a maidservant, and he doesn't care if she has some kind of unseeable blemish. That wouldn't be a reason to negate the sale. or he probably wouldn't even allow him to negate the sale because the sale is good. There's nothing wrong with her. An unseeable blemish doesn't make a difference. Nimtza ganav o kuvustus. Let's say it turned out that she was a ganav, a thief, or a kuvustus, or a kidnapper, and that he didn't know that before. Well, too bad. The Gemara says he accepts that because he should know that going in that these slaves are often thieves and kidnappers, and he can't say, "Oh, I didn't realize that." He should have realized that. My Amar, so what are you going to say? It's something even more than that. It's listim mezuyin. Maybe it turns out that she's an armed robber, not just a thief, but an armed bandit. Oh, nechtav l'malchus, or maybe she has a death sentence on her from the kingdom, and so she's not fit. So those would be good reasons to negate the sale, perhaps. But the Gemara says hano kala islahu. Now those will be well known. Those have a kol. Those the word gets out if that were the case, and so there's nothing that there would be to be concerned about in terms of simpun, in terms of negating the sale by the shifcha kananis, and therefore the whole kav v'chomer falls apart according to Ben Bagabai, because the whole kav v'chomer was based on the logic that said, well, if by a Canaanite slave we're not concerned about simpun, then we shouldn't be concerned about it then based on the kav v'chomer, the logic works out, then all the more so we shouldn't be concerned about it by a wife. But the problem is that we're comparing apples and oranges. When it comes to a Canaanite slave, there is no type of blemish that would fit the bill that he could declare, mekach tos, that it was acquired in error, because of all the reasons that we just mentioned. All the possible blemishes aren't relevant here, as opposed to a wife. So he might find something that discovers something before he consummates the marriage that will want him to retract, and therefore, that's why Ben Bagabai maintains that she shouldn't eat truma, because he may find something and she shouldn't eat truma as an arusa, as a betrothed woman, because until he actually marries her, or until he actually has bia with her perhaps, until then he may still retract the betrothal, because he may find a mum, and therefore it will turn out that she ate truma be'isr. Now the Gemara just concludes and it says, Machti, it says, let's look. Bein lamar lo achla. According to either opinion, she can't eat truma, meaning we gave two reasons. We gave the reason of simpun, that he may find a blemish, and retroactively she'll have eaten truma be'isr, and that was one reason the Rabbanan said that she shouldn't eat truma. That was really the reason that's the reason according to Ben Bagabai. And Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira is saying, no, that's not the reason, that there's a kav v'chomer that shows that that's not the case, but there's a different reason, which is because she might share it with her siblings. So the Gemara says, what's the nafkamina? What's the difference between those two reasons? Both of them agree at the end of the day. Ben Bagabai and Rabbi Yehuda agreed that she can't eat truma midrabanan, but they just give different reasons. What's the nafkamina? What's the practical difference between these two reasons? So the Gemara says, Ika beinayu kibel masar behalach. The differences will be in the following cases. Number one, kibel, if he accepted the fact that she has certain blemishes, well then, we no longer have a concern. If he already accepted, he notified us, he accepts the fact that she has certain blemishes, well then at that point there's no longer concern of simpun, because he's accepted the blemishes. So then she should be able to eat truma as an arusa. But if the reason is that she might share it with her siblings, then that's still a concern. The other nafkaminas are masar v'halach. If either she already left her father's house, she's now in the hands of messengers, and she's on her way to the husband's house to accept, for the nisuin, to consummate the marriage, or halach, or her halchu. Rashi says halchu shluchei ha'av im shluchei habal ve'oda b'derech. The messengers of the father have gone with the messengers of the husband, and she's still on the way. These sound to me basically the same thing. Basically the point is that she's on the way to. She's already out of her parents' house. If she's already out of her father's house, she's no longer around the sibling. She's on her way to consummate the marriage and make it into nisuin. So at that point, there's no concern anymore for for her sharing it with her siblings as an arusa. So at that point, according to that reason, she should be able to eat truma if she's on her way to her husband's house. But if the reason is that he might find a mum on her and he might negate it, well, then we still have this problem, because when she gets there, and he may see something, he may realize something and want to negate the Kiddushin, and therefore, according to that reason, she still should not eat truma. Thank you very much for listening. Have a great week.